Let's work on part C in this video. So show that for any number of flowers, the marginal cost of one more basket, taking into account the excess burden of the coffee tax, equals to the following function. So let's see what's happening here. What is the marginal cost of providing one more basket of flour? Well, that's worth €1, the direct cost of paying for that basket, but we also know that to pay for more flowers, we need more money to raise via taxes, and those taxes cause excess burden. They change the consumption behavior of the students. So because we have excess burden from raising taxes, we will have additional excess burden from getting money for one more basket. And in micro, anything that's additional we call marginal, right? It's just a vocabulary thing. So the marginal excess burden, that's what we're looking for. Now, how do we get to that marginal excess burden? We know that the marginals overall are derivatives of something. So the marginal excess burden is also a derivative. That is the change in the total excess burden, that is the change in the excess burden, because we are raising more taxes due to a change in tax revenue that we must raise. Now, how do we get to that change? Well, we get there in two steps. We have two effects. First of all, we must raise those taxes, meaning that to get to that tax level, we must increase the tax on coffee to get money for one more flour of basket. Hope this makes sense. So that is the first step. We must raise those tax revenue, and we do so by increasing the tax of coffee. Now, as a second effect, what happens is that that tax on coffee causes this distortion in consumption of the student, leading to a change in excess burden, leading to additional excess burden because of the additional taxes. So what we have is that this change in the tax of coffee causes a change in the excess burden. And look how the math works out over here. This two would cancel out, and we get back to our change in excess burden due to the change in the tax, which is the same as the marginal excess burden. Hope this math makes sense. That's how we get here. It's a two-step process. First get the money, then hurt the consumers. That's literally how it goes. So with that said, let's do first things first. What would be the first effect? How can we find out this change in the tax of coffee due to the change in the tax revenue? Well, we know what the tax revenue is, right? We know that the tax revenue, let's write it over here. We did that from the previous video as well, but for the sake of revision, the tax revenue is the tax charged on coffee times the quantity demanded of the coffee. And we also know what the quantity demanded of the coffee is with the taxes. We actually have it over here somewhere. Let's just refresh that. I hope it's not going to take long to find it. Somewhere over here. So there it is. This is the quantity demanded with the taxes, and we actually found out the final version somewhere, which was this one. 200 times TC minus 100 times TC squared. This is the tax revenue. So this is the tax revenue. Let's write it over here. 200 times TC minus 100 TC squared. That is the quantity demanded of coffee. So this is going to be 200 times TC minus 100 times TC squared. This is the tax function that we're looking for, the tax revenue that we are looking for. Now, what we want is the change in the tax that we charge on coffee due to the change in the tax revenue. This is a derivative. This is a derivative, right? But if we differentiate the function that we have, what would we get? So let's say we differentiate because that's what we have. We have the tax revenue as a function of the tax of coffee. So we would differentiate tax revenue with respect to the tax of coffee, which is the same as change in tax revenue due to the change in tax coffee. It's the inverse of this one, but that's no problem because we'll use a math trick to get to what we want. First, let's solve it. What's that going to be? Well, 200 times TC derivative is just equal to 200 minus 100 TC squared derivative. That's 200 times TC. But we need the opposite of this. We need the inverse, not the opposite. The inverse is the correct term. So the inverse of this, right? If we want to get to the change in the tax of coffee due to the change in the tax revenue, that's the same as 1 over what we just calculated. That's equal to 1 divided by change in tax revenue due to the change in tax of coffee. So that will equal to 1 over this function. So that's 1 over 1 over 200 minus 200Tc. So we found one thing. This is the first effect in all our calculation. The second effect is to understand how we get to the change in excess burden due to this change in taxes, and we'll do so in the next video.